Israeli authorities have just released details of the rocket attack by Hamas on the 7th of October. They say that there were 5,000 rockets released and 2,000 mortars. And you know what damage it caused? They destroyed one house. Now, at the time of the attack, people were saying that Hamas had American-made rockets, but it looks like they really just had kind of firecrackers. What the purpose of that launch was, I don't know, but one house. It's funny, there's not many people I knew. I think no one I knew, and me included, didn't know anything about Israel. Whenever Israel's mentioned, it's always, oh, it's complicated, there's no solution. But they don't really know the detail of it. And ironically, this latest episode that's gone off there has piqued my interest. So what I want to do is maybe make 3 videos, this being the first of the 3, about what's happening there. If we start off with the geography of the country, here's a map of Israel, and Israel is actually a very small country. It's only a tenth the size of the UK, and it's got about 8 or 9 million people. And we can see here there's one area that's now occupied by the Palestinians. That's called the West Bank. It's called the West Bank because it runs along the west bank of the River Jordan. And then this tiny area down at the bottom here, this is Gaza. Gaza is only 5 miles wide, it's 25 miles long. And if we zoom in on Gaza here, we can see that to the east side of Gaza is its border with Israel. On the west side is the Mediterranean Sea, and then the border here at the bottom, that is Egypt. But it's the Sinai Desert of Egypt, and there's nobody in the Sinai Desert because it's not really habitable. So if we go through the situation with the current conflict, the facts only, I'm just going to go through the facts only, and no opinion. On the 7th of October, Hamas launched their attack on Israel. They launched the rockets and the mortars, but they also broke through the wall. There's a big wall, it's about 7 meters tall, that encloses the entire Gaza Strip. They used bulldozers to break that wall down in about 5 places. And when the wall was broke down, they then used motorbikes to actually enter Israel. They'd also entered Israel using paragliders off some of the tall buildings. They paraglided over the top of the wall, and they used motorboats to go around the sea and enter Israel from the beach. Now there must have been a lot of Hamas soldiers, because they were able to bring back with them 200 Israeli hostages, and they're said to have killed 1,200 Israeli citizens as well. It actually took the Israeli Defense Force, that's what they call the army in Israel, the IDF, because their job is to defend Israel. The IDF, it took the IDF 6 hours to respond, and in those 6 hours, another thing that Hamas did is they overran an IDF military base in the south of Israel, taking them completely by surprise and killed them all. It's amazing that Hamas were able to do that. The immediate response by the Israeli authorities was to cut off supplies to Gaza. Water, food, medicines, fuel, the lot. They then did a leaf drop in the north of Gaza, telling all the citizens to get down to the south. Now you've got to bear in mind that Gaza is one of the most populated areas on the entire planet. There are 2.2 million people across the whole 25-mile strip, along the whole, and to move 1 million of those people down to the south, that must have been quite a horrendous prospect. But what the Israelis were saying is, if you stay in northern Gaza, where they believed Hamas were, because that's where the attack came from, you will be considered an enemy combatant and you will die. So get out of there. Get down to the south. Get out of the way. Now, almost immediately, Israel began an aerial bombing campaign across Gaza, destroying buildings and killing civilians. They were using the excuse that they believed that Hamas were using Palestinian civilians as human shields. And the Israeli authorities don't tolerate that. You know, if you're using human shields, we'll kill the human shields as well. That's their attitude. The irony of it is, Hamas couldn't go anywhere on the surface of Gaza without being near civilians. It's an incredibly crowded place. Hamas themselves are actually operating in a labyrinth of tunnels deep below Gaza. So any bombing from the air that Israel are going to do isn't going to touch Hamas. And the Israeli authorities, they know that. To date, they've killed more than 10,000 civilians, including 5,000 children, and there are at least another 1,000 children missing. Now, if children are missing, that means they're buried below rubble. They can't find them. That's what it means. So there's more than 5,000 children being killed. And one extremely confusing thing is that almost all Western governments have spoken out against the Hamas terrorists and in favour of Israel, saying that Israel has the right to defend itself. Interestingly, the Russian ambassador to Israel has openly said that Israel doesn't have the right to defend itself because Israel, they're the occupiers, they're the oppressors. It's the occupied and the oppressed that have the right to defend themselves. That's a refreshing, perspective. Ireland and Brazil are two countries that have actually spoken out and told the Israelis that they have to call a ceasefire, stop the killing right away. And Israel's response has been to cut off diplomatic ties with Ireland and Brazil. They're not listening to anything like that. The UK government, the Conservative Party, who's in charge in the UK at the moment, they have spoken in favour of Israel. And interestingly, so have the Labour Party in Israel and the Labour in the UK, and they are the opposition. Their job is to speak out against the government, to argue against any of the government policies, and yet the Labour Party, the opposition, and the main party have both spoken in favour of Israel. It's a complete mystery. Now, Israel have committed, and this is beyond dispute, there's no argument here, Israel have committed numerous war crimes of the most heinous kind. Okay? First of all, they should not have ordered the civilians from northern Gaza to move down to the south, to abandon their homes. That was a war crime. It's also a war crime to kill civilians, funnily enough. This is in accordance with the Geneva Convention and UN international law. The United States, of course, are completely behind Israel, as they always are. Both the UK and the US have actually sent aid, military aid and financial aid to Israel to help them keep up the fight against the Palestinians. The whole thing is completely confusing, but does that not scare you? I would say if that doesn't scare you, then you're not thinking. Because if the UK government is speaking out in favour of Israel, they are condoning war crimes. In fact, they're aiding and abetting war crimes. The most heinous war crimes. Just think about that. Just think about the actual implications of that. The government who should be standing up and upholding international law are actually aiding and abetting war crimes. It's the most terrible, terrible thing. And the media as well. all Western media is speaking out against the awful terrorist attack that Hamas carried out, and speaking in support of Israel. Now, there's one news channel in Britain called GB News, GB Great Britain, GB News. There was a protest in Liverpool Street Station. That's a railway station in London, where 500 protesters showed up in favour of the Palestinians. Now, the argument of GB News was that the police were letting down the people because these people protesting against what Israel are doing are going to be Jew haters, and therefore the police should be preventing hate crimes against Jews. What GB News didn't show, and they knew this 100%, they knew this, their reporters aren't stupid, they knew this. This is what they didn't show about the protest that was in Liverpool Street Station. There are protests involving hundreds of thousands of people all around the world in favour of the Palestinians, in Sydney, in Toronto, in Washington DC, in many other states in the United States, in London. 300,000 people in London, 3 weeks in a row, have showed up to show their solidarity for the Palestinian people. And they are mixed. They are not just Palestinians, they are Jews, they are Christians, they are atheists, they are all religions, they are humanitarians. And what they hate, what they want to stop, is this terrible, terrible carnage that's happening in Israel. That's what the protests are about. And now, governments are starting to take notice of that. Governments who are speaking out in favour of Israel are starting to lose their respect. Now, just one last thing. There's an American called Scott Ritter. He's a former Marine, and then he became a US Naval Intelligence Officer. After he left the US Navy, he then became a UN Weapons Inspector, and he spent a lot of time in Israel working with the Israeli authorities and with the IDF. He has a very interesting perspective on what's going on in Israel at the moment. He says, what Hamas did on the 7th of October was not a terrorist attack. It was a very carefully planned and expertly executed military operation. It was a military attack against the oppressors. And I think that's obvious. But nobody else is talking like that. I think that is what happened. But he says Hamas have been very clever. Hamas knew what the Israeli response would be to their attack. He knew that Israel would hit the rails and would start killing indiscriminately. He knew the havoc and the mayhem that Israel would cause in the Gaza Strip. Hamas knew that they couldn't destroy the Israeli state. But he also knew that Hamas themselves, the Palestinians, would win the sympathy of the other Arab states. And those other Arab states would destroy Israel on their behalf.